Welcome to Off Panel. Yo everybody, welcome to the last episode of Off Panel in 2016. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the co-owner of Chicago's Eisner Award winning comic shop, Challenger Comics Plus Conversation. Or is it Comics and Conversation? It's Patrick Brower. Thanks for coming on, Patrick.
David, thank you for having me. It is Comics and Conversation, but we make a point of using a plus sign and not an ampersand.
I like the plus is great. I don't know what it is about it, but I immediately gravitate towards things that use pluses instead of ands. It just seems nice and clean and kind of fun.
I use pluses more in my personal life writing as well. I think that it gets the point across as well. Mm-hmm. I think there's a formality to an ampersand that I think we were trying to not be formal.
Mm-hmm. I do remember there was, God, what movie was it? There was some movie where they were talking about, we used to be this ampersand that, and then it became this and that. And, I feel like ampersand implies a closeness to it. It's like comics and conversation. Like the plus, I feel like works with that. There's a good vibe to that. And
there's so many stores that do comics ampersand cards.
Oh yeah,
that kind of thing. And we're definitely not a card store.
You definitely want to differentiate there.
That's right.
Well, regardless, I didn't necessarily bring you on to talk about punctuation or what you use to represent. And what I wanted to talk about was, kind of the year in retail. Last year, a little bit, right around this time, I started a article for Sketched that kind of looked at the year in review for comic shops. I don't really do Sketch anymore. It's just kind of a hosting spot for my podcast. So I figured, what better thing to do than get an Eisner Award winning retailer to talk about the year? So I wanted to ask, how was the year for challengers? How was 2016 for you guys?
Well, David, thank you for asking. And my favorite punctuation is the ellipses. I love those three little dots. And I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. First of all, thank you for ending the year with me. I don't know if that's a way to drag everything down or get rid of this so you can start the new year fresh. But 2016 was a very interesting year in the annals of retail sales here at Challengers in Chicago. And at this point, I can comfortably say that we are up for the year, and Challengers has never had a down year in sales. However, the amount that we are up now, and keep in mind there's still not quite 2 weeks left of the year. Mm-hmm. The margin that will be up for the year is just a few percentage points. And it's because we had a very strong first half of the year, and then starting in August, everything started to trend downwards. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because we were seeing this pattern emerge, and now everybody is talking about it in the industry and outside of the industry. If you're a peripheral comics fan, you've heard some rumblings of retailers not doing well, but this pattern has been on our radar since August. And when I first started to bring it up to other retailers, and I don't mean just comic book retailers, but clearly this whole conversation is under the microscope of comics. Mm-hmm. But whenever I don't understand what's happening in our industry, I try to pull back and talk to friends of mine in retail who either have toy stores or paper companies or other type of retail, other type of sales environments. And a lot of people were very quick to blame the election on the people's instability and uncertain credit future and whatnot. And it made me look back to the previous couple of elections. And in 2008, the country was in a recession, and Challengers was a brand new store at that point. So I had thought that as soon as the election was over and people were happy with that result back in 2008, people would immediately go back to spending money. And that didn't happen. It was a very slow build to get to a stable place. But again, that was still within our first calendar year. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that had to do with us being a new store.
Sure.
And then I look back at 2012 and there was no effect on our sales whatsoever because nothing changed and nobody thought it was going to change, I guess.
Yeah.
It's certainly not it's a known fact that Illinois is a blue state and Chicago is a very blue city. And as far as politics go.
And obviously very Obama friendly.
Yes, very, very much so. And no one expected this outcome. And regardless of people's political beliefs, the majority of our clientele, not all, certainly not all, but the majority of our clientele were expecting a very different outcome and are now very unsure about what's happening. And I know a lot of people have been donating money to causes they believe in and charities they think need it the most or might be going away, or are doing whatever they can just to help out their fellow man and to feel better about themselves.
Sure.
So that could be taking away some disposable income, but I don't necessarily think it's that. And I never honestly thought the election was to blame, but that's definitely, as things were heating up, that is when we notice a trend going down.
Mm-hmm.
But to go back and answer your initial question, this was a fine year for challengers. We had taken a step back from as many events as we do, pulled back a little bit just to see what we could do locally and what kind of impact we could have with our events without always trying to fly big names in and doing events like that. And to this day, events are a mystery because we could have A-list comic creators in and have no impact, and we could have unknowns in who we don't really know well, and they bring in a huge audience.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. It's very hard to figure out what events work the best. But I can also tell you that the events also really seem to get the most amount of people. You should see me, David. My hands are motioning so fast. It's as if I'm behind a podium at some sort of a political debate or something. The way no one is here and my hands are moving. I had just had a local comic shop day. We had a local college journalist come in and interview the creators who were here and myself about diversity in the industry. And watching it back, I am just like, clearly, I mean, I'm half Italian, or as my grandfather would say, a quarter Italian, quarter Sicilian. And my hands are just like, oh man, I'm talking with my hands largely. And I figured I would paint that picture for listeners because, you can't see it. I want to give you I want to let you know what the setting is like as I sit here talking to David. I'm actually in Challengers today after hours. All the lights are off, but we have our Christmas tree lit and our moving raptor holding a gift wearing a Santa hat. He's also lit up. And my hands are flailing wildly.
It's worth noting that I also do that when I'm talking. So in case anybody was ever wondering, every episode of Off Panel comes with a lot of gesticulating, especially when Patrick's a guest, apparently.
Just imagine two high school kids in a debate class arguing against each other.
Exactly. Anyways, sorry, continue.
Yeah, that's fine. So events work lately. Community-involved events toward the end of the year have had a good impact in the store. We've done a lot more community outreach in the last 2 months. 3 different elementary schools have had us come in for either reading nights or educational seminars and just be there to let parents know that there's a resource for the kids and whatnot. And while there was different levels of interest for each one of those, and we gave away leftover free comic book day comics and Batman Day comics, and we gave out coupons for free comics back at the store, and the kids loved getting the free books. As of yet, we haven't seen anybody come in saying, oh yeah, we found out about the store from that night, or anybody bringing one of those coupons back. But anything we can do to let parents know that we are a resource for their kids in the community, and just getting the name out. We've been here almost 9 years, but every week there's people who come in who have no idea that we're here. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant battle of trying to let people know that we're here. And I feel like each sentence I give takes you further away from what you had asked. But it was, to boil it down, it was financially our best year yet, but also the year I think we spent the most money getting to that point. And it was, I want to say, one of the best years of product available.
You mean in terms of quality?
Yes. In terms of us being able to point at a table full of books and say, we love this book, we love this book, we love this book.
Right.
And, new books. And what's one of the things that always gets down-eye excited is to be able to introduce someone to a book they've never heard of. Mm-hmm. If somebody's on the fence about a book and will say, yeah, it's a good book, we don't get the credit for introducing them to that. And we're not in this for the credit, but we're in this for exposing people to new things. And I think 2016 gave us a tremendous number of great books that we'll be able to sell for hopefully years to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the really interesting thing you said there was kind of how it was a tale of two halves. Like the first half, you were trending up big time, and then around August, you were falling off. Partially, perhaps because of the election. But one thing I'm curious about is how much of that do you think was? I mean, when you think about the first half, you had Secret Wars was ending in the first half, which was a big hit nationally. I don't know how big it was for you guys. You had Rebirth kick off in June, and I think May was actually when the Rebirth special was.
That's correct.
I don't even remember what led into Rebirth, or if anything actually led into Rebirth. I think it was just...
technically, there was a Superman story where they killed the New 52 Superman.
And I guess there was Darkseid War or whatever it was, but yeah. I'm trying to remember what else was big, but really it kind of was like the beginning of Rebirth was what kind of led into that. And then after that, I think, when did Returnability stop? Was that October?
It was the first 6 issues for most books. So that's June, July, and August for the double shipping books. And then, upwards, basically, yeah. We've just, in fact, on the invoice that came out this week, we got our first, technically the second and third rounds of return credit back because we had nothing to return from the first round of books that were available to be returned.
Yeah. So
we literally had 0 books to return to DC.
So I have to ask, seems fairly obvious, but was Rebirth a big part of the lift early on, at least? I guess it wasn't early on, but you know what I'm saying, like the May, June.
Yeah, but it was definitely a big part of the lift. And honestly, the DC books that are, like, the numbers are leveling off, but they're leveling off at points for us that are considerably higher than those titles were selling previous, and most of those titles are twice a month. Mm-hmm. So that also helps.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I actually think that's amazing. The fact that the returnability was an option, but you guys really just didn't have much to return whatsoever. I think that was the case for my shop too. If I remember correctly, you didn't, or you all retailers were kind of in an odd position because you were trying to decide what to order for these books. You're like, okay, I'm going to look at historical records, and historical records say I should order this, but this is a new thing, so I don't really know. And so you guys were in a position where you ordered a little bit softer than you had demand for, right?
Well, it turned out that way, but we ordered what we thought was very optimistic. But one of the titles I always use as an example was Green Arrow. Our Green Arrow numbers were very low at the end of the New 52. So we quadrupled those numbers.
Wow.
And those turned out to be not enough by a lot. Mm-hmm. But here's the weird thing about Rebirth. Like, this happened in New 52. Everything sold out because everything came out at once.
Right.
Rebirth had a nice slow rollout. Mm-hmm. But after the first month, people's interest dropped off in trying new titles. So luckily we had returnability for those, because after we saw the first month worth of sales for books like Cyborg or Blue Beetle, when they were coming out a little bit later, we ordered we should have ordered what we did for the first round of books, but instead we ordered significantly higher, saying, well, we sold out of those too quickly. Let's not sell out of these. And we didn't even come close to selling what those initial books had sold. Mm-hmm. I think that by the third and fourth month of Rebirth, people just weren't interested in trying anything new. They might have already been tapped out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is one interesting thing, is like, I like the idea that they rolled it out kind of slowly, because when the new 52, when they dropped all those books in 1 month, it was really exciting going in. You're like, 13 number ones each week. This is bonkers. But then you're like, God, this is so many. It's really, like, you had to make choices. Yeah. It was making actual consumer choices at the time where you're like, I guess I'll get these 3 because otherwise I'm going to be destitute and I can't eat, and I won't get these other 9 or other 10. But this time it was odd because, like you were saying, you kind of get committed to these, and then you kind of figure out what you want, and then you kind of know what to expect to a certain degree, so the heat kind of falls off to a certain degree. It's an odd position.
One of the interesting things about a lot of the Rebirth books for us is that for the subscribers that had subscribed to them in the beginning or right as they were coming out, not many people have dropped off. It's just that people didn't take chances on things off the shelf.
Sure.
as it went later on. And we're starting to see some books drop. Like, again, I don't want to pick on Green Arrow because it's one of the ones that I read, but it has had, in the last month, it had, I want to say, like 5 or 6 people drop it. And that's a decent number of people who aren't happy with where the story is going or whatnot. But we still have more subscribers for Green Arrow than we were selling total copies of for New 52.
That's amazing.
And that's almost across the board. Our Batman numbers have only gone down a little bit. Our detective numbers have climbed dramatically. Our Superman numbers are much, much stronger. Mm-hmm. And Action was always selling better for us than Superman before, and it still is now, but it's selling all the core DC books, even the Lantern books, which are the ones that seem to have the least customer satisfaction at our store.
Yeah.
They're still selling considerably better than they were before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's when you get outside of those core characters that you don't see books hitting. Like Batgirl is not doing very well. Batgirl Birds of Prey is not doing well at all. Mm-hmm. Any of the later released books, and again, I pointed to Cyborg and Blue Beetle, those are not doing well for us either.
Yeah, I have to imagine they expected that, because I mean, it's like the lower tier characters, and not to downplay Cyborg or anything like that. He is going to be in the Justice League movie and things like that, but at the same time,
sure,
he's never really caught on to the same degree outside the Teen Titans environment. And
yeah, I agree.
It makes sense that they would have rolled him out later, but at the same time, it's kind of like people were already set in their ways, and like the excitement had kind of worn off. So if he dropped, was Cyborg in the first month or the second month?
Second month or third month.
Yeah. And like once you get to that point, it's like the excitement is kind of gone, so it kind of you lose some of that momentum. Sorry,
personally, as a Cyborg reader, I don't need to see him getting dismantled all the time. I want a villain to be a threat to him without taking him apart.
But he's a cyborg. That's what you do with cyborgs.
I know. On a quick side note, this morning I had started to watch the Justice League action cartoon that debuted last night. They had a 1 hour special. Uh-huh. And the lead into it was Teen Titans Go. So my DVR caught like the last minute of Teen Titans Go. But then as the credits rolling for Teen Titans Go building up to Justice League action, it's Changeling or Beast Boy watching TV. And Cyborg comes in, he's like, "What are you watching?" He's like, "Oh, it's this new cartoon with the Justice League. It's all the big guys." And Cyborg's like, "Am I in it?" And Beast Boy's like, "No, it's just the big characters." Then you see Cyborg on the screen, and the Teen Titans Go Cyborg is like, "Yeah, man, I am on it. Look at me, I'm right there."
That's awesome.
And then you see a flash of green, and Beast Boy's like, "Oh man, is that me?" And it cuts back. You're like, "No, that's Swamp Thing."
Oh my god.
Yeah.
You know the sad thing is.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible comic book fan. I had absolutely no idea that was actually happening. I had no idea there was a new Justice League show. I'm the worst.
Well, I'll be honest that it was a customer that told me that it was debuting last night. I didn't know that ahead of time.
Okay.
I knew it was coming. I didn't know when. But luckily, my roommate had already put it on the DVR, so it was waiting for me. Mm-hmm. As far as Marvel events go for us, they sell very well, even if we don't want them to. Even if, and I gotta say, I think Civil War 2 has been a letdown as far as the storyline goes. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it is as late or later than Secret Wars was, and the fact that all of these books that have come out post that, like it happened last year with Secret Wars, there are literally people that won't read Champions because it takes place after Civil War, which isn't over yet. And they've had to do too many filler issues of books, especially Bendis' books like Guardians of the Galaxy, like Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. The previous issue of Spider-Man that had come out to our recording, I thought was insulting to fans because it's just all of his friends all of Miles' friends running around saying, "Where's Miles? What's happening?" And they're using the same pieces of art over and over again from Civil War 2.
Oh my god.
The Captain America on the Capitol building steps with Miles over his body. And then this issue that came out this week clearly was supposed to come out after Civil War 2 because it kind of shows you things that happen at the end of Civil War.
Oh my god.
But then they take away all the characters' dialogue, so they're not talking about it. They're just reacting to it. So they don't actually say what happens, but it really feels like there was dialogue they just took out and made it silent so they don't ruin anything, even though it kind of ruins things.
That is the worst. I've not been reading that, but like just your description of that just makes the whole thing sound like such a debacle. And I know a lot of people are unhappy with Marvel right now, a lot of retailers. Actually, a lot of people in general. I mean, I know that looking at forums and, you know, Reddit and things like that and Twitter, you see a lot of people who are not exactly pleased with the current direction Marvel's in. And it's just fascinating. Like hearing that, it's easy to understand why. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, would you say that one of the contributors in the last half of the year has just been Civil War II not kind of performing to expectations and Marvel now not really connecting with your audience?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I don't know if you got a chance to look at this article that was on the beat, I think on Monday, where they analyzed all of Marvel's sales numbers for October, where they break down Marvel's output, you know, title by title. And this amazes me every time. And you and I briefly touched on this before we were recording, but I say this every year when we do our best of lists, and for us, for challengers, it means sales, our highest selling graphic novels and comics for the year. If you take any industry best of list and flip it, that's what our list is.
Yeah.
And books that do crazy good for us are at the very bottom of the Marvel list. Books like, for example, Uncanny Avengers charts higher on Marvel sales charts than all new all different Avengers, and we sell triple, if not quadruple, all new all different Avengers numbers than Uncanny Avengers numbers.
Wow.
Something like Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers have a almost 25,000 sales rate difference between them. When for us, they're like neck and neck.
Right.
And it's always been books for us that are outside of the regular Marvel continuity, like Squirrel Girl, like Spider-Gwen. I'm literally walking the shelves right now so I don't get any of these wrong. Like Vision, like Silver Surfer, that have our higher numbers, our higher sales rates. And these are all very low on Marvel's charts. It's only when you get down to books like Silk that Silk performs or Spider-Woman, and I love Dennis Hope as a Spider-Woman.
Yeah,
it does not sell well for them, and it only sells mediocre for us.
Which is a shame. I mean, like I haven't read it lately because I was really on board for Javier Rodriguez, and and like that opening stuff was so amazing in the new volume. Although I honestly wonder sometimes how much it hurts that there was like a second volume so quickly after the first volume.
Yeah, honestly, that stuff bothers a lot of people, and people don't understand it. Ms. Marvel is one that is a very strong seller for us, but also more than halfway down, maybe 3/4 down a Marvel sales chart.
Yeah, I ran into a weird situation recently in regards to the first volume, second volume thing. I was like organizing my comics, and I couldn't figure out. I hadn't organized it for forever, and I was looking at 2 Unbeatable Squirrel Girl number 5s, and I was like, which one is the first volume? and it was very perplexing. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I just like put them both at 5 and hoped for the best.
Yeah, honestly, I think you're better off.
But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I was going to ask you about that because every time we talk, it always, you know, and I talk to other shops. Like I talk to Big Bang Comics in Dublin, and like, you know, I use this example a lot. Gotham Academy is a huge seller for them. A lot of other shops, it doesn't sell well. You look at the list, it's one of DC's like lower selling books. But for you guys have, you know, you have it kind of flipped. You told me that before. You know, if you flip the list, that's kind of what yours looks like. What books stood out as uniquely successful this year for challengers?
Vision is one of the books that we rallied around because we loved it and it sold really well here, but is also very low on Marvel sales charts. It makes a lot of people's critical lists, and there's a lot of online talk about it, but if you look at the actual Marvel sales for Vision, it's low. Yeah.
And do you think that's just because you guys are hand selling it, pushing it on, you know, telling people that this is a great book and you should pick it up? Or do you think it's you guys have a particularly attuned to what works customer base, or what do you think that is?
I think it's half and half. We have found out time and time again that just because we love a book and we champion it, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right.
Green Valley is a book that I love right now from Image, Max Landis and Camo, and after we got advanced PDFs from Image for the first 2 issues before they came out. So that gave me months to build it up and talk about it. And now we're on issue 3 and we have maybe 8 subscribers for it. So, I mean, that is a book that I still, to this day, I'm like, you guys, you got to check this out. It's so great. I love it. And I know it's fantasy. It's not for everybody. And weirdly, I'm not even a fantasy fan. But that just, like, every once in a while, we get shown that just because we champion something doesn't mean we actually have the ability to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it will never solely be our hand selling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hand selling does work, but it has to be a book that catches on. And this, I hate using Saga as an example, but because we got a PDF of Saga way back in the day, we doubled our orders for issue 1 and talked it up like crazy. But Saga is a book that is universally beloved,
Right.
and it didn't need us to hand sell it, but we did as well. So that helped it be the juggernaut that it is. However, our Saga numbers are not as good as they were. And if you look at the current arc, we are getting stuck with so many copies, so many single issues on the shelf than ever before for Saga. And it's weirding us out because that doesn't happen.
That is weird.
It's getting to the point where the majority of the Saga readers are club members, and we're just not selling it off the rack. We still have strong club numbers. However, in the last year, I think we've lost about 12 or 13 Saga subscribers.
Interesting.
Which I mean, losing 1 or 2 or even 5 could be people moving, people quitting comics altogether, people waiting for the trade. But Saga's a book that never followed that kind of a pattern. Like, we would always try to order more of an issue after a trade, hoping that trade readers would not be able to wait and jump to the singles. They don't do that.
Yeah.
For Saga, for sure, they don't do that.
Fascinating.
But yes, so when Saga is taking a hit, that's when you go, wait a minute. Or a book like Moonshine, which has what I would call an A-list creative team, Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo. They've done a lot of work together. 100 Bullets, of course, Spaceman.
Mm-hmm.
Our Moonshine Club numbers are, I would say, less than half of what I thought they would have been.
Wow. That's interesting. But before we go on to, I want to talk about the doom and gloom stuff here in a minute. But I did want to ask, like, what do you think? You said Saga kind of dropped off. Obviously, like, you're not saying that that's like one of the books that was a big reason for, like, kind of the soft second half. But besides Marvel, was there anything in particular that kind of stood out for you as underperforming?
As a whole, Image Comics are down. They don't have as many big name creators, so people aren't taking as many risks or as many chances on Image books. And even books like The Fix, which we raved about and loved,
Right.
It has a solid club number, but it's like a third of our Saga numbers, and it's strong, but people fell off of it faster than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
I Hate Fairyland is down for as far as rack sales and subscriber sales, and there hasn't been, with the exception of Black Monday Murders, there hasn't been a very strong Image launch in a little bit.
Yeah.
And even a book like Motor Crush, which has a very active creative team on social media and a very rabid fan base, saying it dramatically underperformed for us is almost saying too little.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I mean, it was a really good book. I was very
I
impressed
agree. I like it. I think it's anybody that likes Fast and Furious movies would really enjoy this book, I think.
Wow. I'm a little surprised by that. I guess I haven't really seen, like, kind of widespread talk about it in terms of, like, performance, but at the same time it is kind of fascinating given the fact that Batgirl got a lot of rep, and, like, it seemed like it kind of excited people about it, and people really like the team, at least online. Maybe I don't know, it's always interesting seeing kind of the difference between kind of online chatter versus in-store performance. It seems like a lot of times there's high variance between those two sides.
I think a perfect example of that is this election cycle, where if you look at my Facebook feed, everybody who was on it was very pro-Hillary.
Right.
But clearly Donald Trump won the election, so there are way more people out there than I was exposed to, I think it's just basically what we surround ourselves with.
Right.
I wanted to look at a book like Reborn, which has 2 stellar creators.
Yeah. Huge names.
And at best, it's a mid-level Miller book for us, and each issue is selling less than the one before it.
It's really fascinating.
Get this one, 7 to Eternity. 7 to Eternity #1, we sold out of very quickly. We've gotten the second prints, and I think they're on third prints of #1 by now. And #1 keeps selling. I have right now in my hand a stack of #2s that is like 3 inches thick.
What? Wait, so #1 is selling, but #2 isn't?
Yes, #1 keeps selling out of the printings, but nobody is buying #2. This, if you can hear this, this is #2s.
Is #1 selling in your store though?
No, that's what I meant. I mean, we keep selling out of #1.
Wow, that is bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if, to a certain degree, and this is just me spitballing. Listeners, this is not me like making bold statements about how things work or anything like that. But sometimes I have to wonder how often people kind of try out #1 and then switch to trades because the $9.99 thing for the first volume. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know if that's a thing, but
I don't think it is, David. That is a point a lot of people bring up, but I think people plan to wait
and then they don't.
And I don't think they get to it. Like, we literally, there was and I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of things, but there was Joe Field from Flying Colors Comics and other cool stuff in California had a Twitter posting, like 8 or 9 or 10 posts about the state of the industry. And one of the things he had said was, the time for trade waiting is not now. You have to let your comic store know as soon as possible that you want a series. And I kid you not, within mere seconds of me reading that, I got an email from a club member saying, hey, I want to drop all my books and move to trade.
Wow.
But the problem with that is that, first of all, people don't necessarily know if they're in the middle of a storyline when they're dropping. Secondly, the next time a trade comes out, they're already going to have that material because it's stuff they've been buying in singles.
Right.
So by the time new material comes out, enough of that comes out that gets collected.
10 months.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then at that point, they've not read that book for long enough that they don't have that desire anymore, and they just say, I can live without it.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've switched to trades for a lot of things, and it's like, it is such a demonstrably different reading experience, and it completely kind of takes you out of the flow of things that it really kind of interrupts your experience. It's weird. It's like, I want to start reading single issues again, because otherwise I kind of feel so disconnected from it, because it's the trade release strategies are so all over the place. A comic could come out 6 months from now, or it could come out a year from now based off of the publisher, and it's bizarre. But I want to ask about Black Monday Murders. That, of all books, I would have expected to be a kind of, not a tough sell, because it, like, I sent out my newsletter with my favorite comics of the year, and Black Monday Murders is legitimately my favorite comic this year. But it was $4.99. It's like, Hickman doing maximum Hickman stuff. And I would have thought that would have been almost a tough sell. It wasn't a tough sell for you guys.
It wasn't, and it was actually one of the better selling first Hickman issues for us in a while. And one of the ways that I approach it to somebody is, it's $5 or whatever, but it'll take you like a half hour to read that book.
It's crazy thick. I mean,
you are getting
thick, it's dense.
Yeah, it's dense. You are getting so much entertainment value for your dollar.
Mm-hmm.
When if you take $4 and read a recent issue of Spider-Man, you're getting 2 pages of art that have already been reprinted, or they're from another book, and then nothing happens.
Oh my god!
And then you get Black Monday Murders, where you have to learn an entire alien language to understand what's going on.
Yeah. God, I still can't do it. I'm still horrible at it. I do have to admit, it is like, this is going to sound horrible, so I apologize, Marvel, but it is kind of like comparing, a fine dining experience with like multiple courses versus like fast food. It's like,
sure.
The Black Monday Murders to me reads completely different than every comic that is out there right now, and it's just a crazy comic. But no more about that. I want to talk about the doom and gloom stuff. You talked about Joe Field on the Comics Beat this week. Todd Allen wrote an article that was all about some of the reasons that retailers may be concerned about overall performance for the industry. There's been a lot of talk of 2017 having some store closures, especially early on in the year. I'm curious about what you have seen. Like I said, there's been talk amongst retailers and online that things are not going super well. But the comic industry has a tendency of being pretty cyclical by nature, and doom and gloom always kind of seems like part of that.
Sure. Comic stores are such a weird beast because so many stores are run week to week, meaning like you make enough money this week to survive till next week. it's not a situation where a lot of the people doing it have a lot of business experience going in, and you don't make so much money that you're okay for a while at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a friend in a different industry about the Christmas sales season, and they were telling me that for their store, which is not a comic store, they make enough money in their holiday season to pay for their rent for the next year.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that would be awesome to do, but that is how other businesses approach things, you know?
Wait, I
comic stores.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say something. I was in a tea store earlier. I was buying some tea for somebody for Christmas, and they said that they do 70% of their business in December.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And they said it's enough to sustain for the rest of the year.
It makes you wonder how bored they are the rest of the year.
Yeah, he's like, I just spend the guy that was ringing us up was just like, I spend most of the rest of the year just drinking tea and cleaning. I'm like, that sounds really, I mean, like, I like tea, don't get me wrong, but that sounds really effing boring.
Were you buying a Christmas gift, or were you buying tea for yourself?
Oh, I realized that I actually have a gift card for that place. It was my first time ever being in that place, and I want to go back and buy all the tea because I like tea a lot.
I literally have already gotten one Christmas gift this year, and it was a box of fancy tea.
Oh, lucky
there you go. Yeah. So comic stores have and this is not every comic store, but it's a lot of them. You mentioned store closings. There is a store in the suburbs of Chicago that is closing at the end of December. There's another store that I've heard that is thinking about doing the same. And as you and I both know, whenever a comic store goes under, there's a percentage of those people who shop there that just quit reading comics altogether.
Yeah.
So obviously, the more comic stores, the better. But comics are such a weird industry that whenever the economy tanks, comic stores do great.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the economy is amazing and people are making money left and right, comic stores hurt. And I've never been able to figure out why that is.
You're the second person I've heard that from, like, recently. It's very bizarre, and I have no idea how that's the case.
If you look back at the .com boom, when millionaires were being born left and right, the comics industry took the biggest hit it had in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me to look back at like 1996 when things were headed in the same direction, and then you look back at articles of people saying what it took to get comics out of that, and it was things like Batman Hush. It was things like the Ultimates line. Mm-hmm. It was bolder and more experimental things. And I'll be honest, Dark Knight 3, huge sales success for us in the past year.
Mm-hmm.
We're down about 20% from what those numbers were when it was first there, but I think a lot of that has to do with the delays.
Oh yeah.
And then at the time, now people have all sorts of new DC product to take their money when before they didn't.
Yeah.
I want to mention this real quick. The first Batman TMNT crossover, we thought was going to do fine. We didn't realize it was going to be a juggernaut. Like, we could have sold normal Batman numbers for this when our normal turtle numbers are about a tenth of what our Batman numbers are. Mm-hmm. And we could have done normal numbers. Now this second series, which is the cartoon version of each of them, is selling like Blue Beetle. And that's disturbing because we have this racked with Batman, with the Turtles, and we have it in sidekicks as well. I can't believe the drop-off from the first series to this series, and that's another thing about the comics industry I'll never be able to understand. What makes people as a whole not buy a specific book? And I'm going to expand that out. There are days, like, we'll have some dead sales days, and I'll be talking to other retailers in the city, and they're also having dead sales days. Yet on days we do great, so do they.
Yeah.
It's like a hive mind for the comic buying public, and I've never understood it.
I understand.
I love it. I can't plan by it, you know?
I feel like I understand the Batman TMNT thing to a certain degree because people, you look at like the Sam Wilson thing, although you said it's performing well for you, or you look at like, Jane Foster Thor or things like that. There's some people who will categorically say, despite the fact that it is in a comic that is titled The Mighty Thor, that is not Thor. Or, Sam Wilson, like, that is not Captain America. But then you look at, Batman TMNT, you're talking about a cartoon version versus the original real version. And and then, like, people make this decision because some people have fundamental issues with quote unquote cartoony art, regardless of whether or not it's effective. I mean, you look at Squirrel Girl. I know some people who won't read that, despite the fact that I will talk that book up until like I'm dead, because they just for some reason think Erica Henderson's not a good artist, despite the fact that she can tell a story better than damn near anybody.
Right?
Yeah, it's very odd.
Quick side note: did you happen to pick up or look at the Gwenpool holiday special for this year?
I did not.
Give it a look next time you're at your store, because Ryan North writes a story in it, and it's a Miles Morales Spider-Man versus Fin Fang Foom story.
Oh my god, I'm in.
He also brings in his anecdotes at the bottom of the pages.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun just for that regard.
So, but going back to like the all the store business that's going on, do you feel like this is out of the ordinary? Do you feel like this is kind of part of the cycle that we kind of deal with every year? Because I feel like last year it came at the beginning of the year. People were talking about how January, February, March were really slow, and is this bad? Is our businesses or our shops going to go out of business? Or do you feel like this is different?
I feel this is different, and I also want to point out how earlier this year there were a lot of articles about this is the best comics have ever been selling, and comic sales are better than ever. And every time I read those, I'm like, don't say that, people.
Jinx.
Yeah, I don't believe in jinxes, but whenever you say something like that, you're just asking for a rug to get pulled out from under you. Mm-hmm. I think this is different because, again, we're looking at it from the microscope of comics, but I think this is happening to everybody, and it is because, and I'm still working this theory because I don't fully understand it, but I'm trying to.
All right.
America has changed from a manufacturing company or company. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the American company. America has changed from a manufacturing country to a service country.
Sure.
We're not about making things. We're about service.
Yeah.
But the majority of jobs were making jobs. Mm-hmm. They were people in the trenches, and whether it be jobs being taken overseas, or whether it being people being replaced by robots, these jobs just aren't there anymore. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot of people don't have money unless you're still in the tech world and you have an obscene amount of money. Mm-hmm. But even there is a McDonald's near us in the suburbs that has switched to the automated cashier stations where you go to it, you go up, you type what you want into a thing, and someone brings it to your table. It's because the proposed idea of $15 an hour minimum wage is enough to make these major corporations say, we can't pay that. We don't want to pay that. Let's eliminate those jobs. And it's worth more to them to install these expensive computer systems to avoid having to pay a human being and then to not have to pay their health insurance. And then it's one less cost for them. Mm-hmm. And then that's one less person who has a job.
Right.
And then they're fighting for another job, and everybody is fighting over these minimum wage jobs, even the ones that aren't at $15 an hour. And it is a very small portion of our customers who have really high-paying jobs, although I find it kind of funny that aside from Dal and I, we are the only two full-time employees here at Challengers. Everybody else is 1 day a week or so. Mm-hmm. But as such, they all have full-time jobs elsewhere. Mm-hmm. They all make more than we do in their full-time jobs than we do at Challengers.
Wow.
And by a significant amount.
Wow.
And it's just the kind of thing, like sometimes we think, what if we had 9-to-5 jobs where we were just customer support at some sort of app company?
Yeah. See, maybe what you need to do is you need to flip it. You guys need to get a bunch of 5-day-a-week employees, and then you guys can have part-time or full-time jobs on the side.
I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
I think we can do that. Dal and I are trying to thinking if we could get away with getting one full-time job between the two of us that we each share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just like, hey, computer oriented. That way, like you don't actually have to interface with somebody, so no one realizes
they wouldn't even know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but I actually really like the theory you're talking about. It seems logical to me, and I think it actually goes a little step beyond that too, because there was an article recently up here in Yonder, Alaska, and it was talking about how like alcohol sales have dropped dramatically, especially in bars. Like it used to be a very high percentage were sold to liquor stores, and then like 20% were to bars, and now it's much more like 90%, 10%. And the reason why is because people don't want to go out to get that stuff anymore because they want these like quality beers. And when they do go out, they drink like 2 or 3 IPAs instead of, 20 Coors Lights because they want this refined experience. And I wonder if that kind of reflects to a certain degree that people want a top-notch experience and they're only going for, like I was talking to a retailer earlier this week. We were talking about how, because the more service focused, like you're talking about, like some shops might be struggling just because they're not used to people who want like kind of above and beyond service and want more than just somebody to ring them up. And
sure,
I wonder how much that impacts it. And it's impossible to say. That's just like blind speculation. But I think it kind of relates to what you're saying in a other side of the coin sort of way.
No, and that makes perfect sense. And one of the things that has always, I think, benefited us specifically is that Challengers has both Dal and I. We're both owners. We're both full-time employees. We're not a store that's like one person works at it, but 2 of the owners have full-time jobs and are just owners on paper. Like you get both of us at the same time.
Yeah.
And my strengths are his weaknesses and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So he can do the things I can't do and I can do the things he can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, in our favor. But of course, that also means Challengers has to afford 2 full-time salaries as well as part-timers as well as everything else.
Yeah. The guy who owns my shop up here in Alaska is a assemblyman also, so he's very busy with other things. I don't actually see him in the shop. He's too busy running the city, so it's an odd
wow.
setup. Anyways, well, so I want to ask, I don't want to ask any deep and dark secrets or anything
sure.
like that goes on the Comics Pro boards, but you're a board member of Comics Pro now. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm coming to the end of my first full year.
Congratulations. That is awesome. I'm very happy for you. I am curious, what have you heard amongst other retailers? Like outside of Chicago, you said that there has been ones, one is closing, another one is, potentially closing. What have you been hearing from other shops? Is it kind of like this all around?
Yeah, there's a couple of stores that have had GoFundMe campaigns. One of them, yes, and then there was another one in San Francisco, and I think they're called Whatever, and I know they hit their goal.
Mm-hmm.
But you're hearing this from a lot of people, and to say that comic folk are reactionary is an understatement.
Mm-hmm.
But this is definitely making the rounds. This is definitely a thing everybody's concerned with. And you and I were talking before about how with 2,700 different comic stores that have diamond accounts, you can have 2,700 different ways to do the same thing.
Right.
And then you could talk to, pick any 5 retailers and ask them about a book, and you will get answers that range from that's our bestseller to we can't sell that at all to we love it to you can't pay me to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a tiny cross section. That kind of thing happens all the time. So most people don't speak out when things are great. Nobody ever says, "Hey, everybody, things are great here. How are you?"
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you're never at the bar with your friends saying, "Man, my wife is the best. Here's all the great things she does." It's always, "Here are the problems I have with my significant other," because you want to complain about them. You want sympathy. You want someone to say, "Yeah, man, that sucks. I feel for you."
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting a lot of that in comics retail. There's a lot of people concerned about the trends because when it happens to you, you think, "Oh, this is not good for me. I got to do something."
Mm-hmm.
When you see it happening to everybody, you think, this is more than just my store. This is happening to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if it weren't for the fact that I'm seeing it happen outside of comics because I'm looking for it, I am worried about comics. What we're doing now, and for the last several years, Christmas sales never start for us until the week or 10 days before Christmas. That's when people start buying at comic stores.
Slackers.
Back in the day, yeah, I agree. Back in the day, it used to be after Thanksgiving and moving forward. But the last couple of years, that's why later in December or mid-December, I'm not worried because I know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And it started Thursday this week, and we've had a strong Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I know we'll have a very solid week leading up to Christmas. This is also an interesting year for us because comic deliveries go through Christmas and New Year's with no break, when in the past, either there's been a skip week or you get your product early because of holiday shipping and you've paid for it ahead of time or whatever. So now we have to make money between the week of Christmas, the week between Christmas and New Year's, because we'll have a full week's worth of books to have to afford. Mm-hmm. But that's fine. That's the way it goes. We have an interesting situation for us that I don't know that other stores have, but we do all of our reorders on Sundays, so we can get those reorders on Wednesday. So when people come in for the new books, we're restocked as well. But also, here's the catch, David. By placing reorders on Sunday, we can order that week's new product if there's a title we think we're going to be short on and still get it on Wednesday. If we order that product on Saturday, we get it 2 weeks later. If we order that product on Monday, we'll get it the next week.
That is
if
really
you
weird.
order it Sunday, you get it Wednesday. And that's how we've been doing things for a while now. But sometimes that Sunday order goes on to the next week's invoice. Sometimes it goes on in 2 weeks. And it should always go on the next week, but it doesn't. And sometimes Diamond pushes it to the following week. But that guarantees that the next one will also go on that. So we'll have 2 weeks worth of reorders to afford over the span of 1 week.
Oh, man.
So that means we have to really budget our reorders after that until it evens out. And then invariably when it catches up, it happens again. And this is one of the weeks where we're not billed for any of our reorder stuff, meaning it's all going to come on the bill we get between Christmas and New Year's.
So you don't just pretend like it's a free week?
Correct. Yeah.
It's probably a good plan. Probably a good plan not to do that.
Exactly. So we have to keep that into account. But to go back to your question about what retailers are saying, a lot of retailers are nervous. A lot of retailers are concerned. And like I said at the start of this podcast, Challengers has never had a down year. And we are not foolish enough to think that we never will. We know that economy doesn't work that way. It's great to think we won't, but we have to get ready for it. And looking back at the end of 2015 to the end of 2016, we're down about $1,000 a week. That is not a huge amount, but it's enough. It's a $4,000 difference over the course of a month, and we could use that $4,000, you know? That's our rent, roughly, you know? That right there is if we're making our rents less per month. You know, it's not like we're only making $4,000 in a month and it's handicapping us, but you know, it's a small percentage, but it's $1,000 a week is a big enough deal.
Yeah.
And where I notice it the most, and this is what bugs me the most, not bugs me like stop touching me, but like I'm concerned, is the number of people coming in is a lot less. I've noticed we're down, averaging 20 people a Wednesday down.
Wow.
Than normal, than like over the summer.
And you have absolutely like no idea as to where they went. They just aren't coming in anymore.
Correct.
Wow.
And it'd be one thing if we were making it up like, oh, they're not coming in Wednesdays. They're coming in Thursdays. Or they're coming in Saturdays. They're not. And I can't point at it and say, oh, you know, it's Bill Smith. He's not coming. It's not like that. You know, our regulars still come in, but it's not subscribers. It's off the shelf people, and you never know when somebody leaves. Like one of the biggest questions we get a lot is, how many people have you lost to digital sales?
Oh,
we'll never know. Yeah, no one ever says, oh, by the way, I'm not shopping here anymore because I'm buying digitally.
They don't send you a letter or something?
Yeah, right. Right. So like we'll never know unless somebody physically says, hey, I'm moving. We don't know why they stopped shopping here.
So yeah, and that is, are you able to like look at, you know, kind of how sales change after those people drop off and kind of have some sort of understanding as to like what the profile of those people were like, or is that just a total crapshoot?
It's more of a total crapshoot than anything else. One of the reasons we're not terribly worried about the business climate right now is because of FOCs, we have the ability to adjust as quickly as we can. And, you know, if a book stops selling, we stop ordering it. And it is kind of a vicious cycle, because if a book doesn't sell and we stop ordering it, we're also admitting we won't ever have it for somebody who just wants to pick it up off the shelf randomly. Yeah. but you can't stock like that because that person may never come.
And because there's like a million comics today.
Yes, there's a million comics for sure. And it's every once in a while when someone will come in and say, "Oh, do you have the new Judge Dredd?" It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't stock Judge Dredd for the shelf. It stopped selling for us. We stopped selling it." Mm-hmm. And they're like, "Oh, that's too bad. I wanted to buy that." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sucks. I wish I had it for you. But also, you're the only person in 5 years to come in and ask for a Judge Dredd comic off the shelf. So, I couldn't keep stocking Judge Dredd for 5 years hoping you would come in."
Yeah.
And even if you do, you want the new one, not these 4 years worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And I know I'm not Judge. That's not an exact example. Judge Dredd hasn't had 5 years worth of comics. They have miniseries or restarts or whatever. I'm not picking on Judge Dredd. I'm using that as an example of a book that doesn't have a major following with us.
So this isn't a blanket statement that you hate Judge Dredd?
That is correct. I do not hate Judge Dredd. In fact, I thought the last Dredd movie was excellent.
It was.
And
it was really good.
Last year for Christmas, our guy Kent, who has a 3D printer, made Dow and I and Jimmy Dredd badges with our names on them.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay, so I want to ask, just, we've talked about some of the things that were down for you guys. What are some of the things you're hearing as far as what may be kind of, customers leaving, that's obviously one thing. Election, another thing. Economy in general, obviously a big player. But are there any like specific things that people are saying as to what's not working and what's kind of driving some of their downtimes? Or is it more just kind of general environmental type things?
I don't know that there's a set answer for that. People will happily voice their displeasure about things that Marvel is doing. And it's easy to point at Marvel and say, here's what's not working for our customers, and you are a majority of our sales. So when people are unhappy with you, they're unhappy with comics. And it's not like if you get somebody who's only buying DC, it's very hard to say, hey, have you seen Mayday from Image? Mm-hmm. There's no correlation between what they read and what they want versus a lot of the Image books. So it's hard to pivot somebody to something else. Mm-hmm. There is not occasionally, and I don't think this is as big of a deal as people say, but occasionally somebody will come in after not being in for like 6 weeks, and they'll have 2 to 3 copies of certain DC titles, mm-hmm. and they'll think, was I gone that long? Mm-hmm. Like, no, they come out every other week.
Yeah.
But I think that the quality level of those books and the enjoyment people get out of them negates the worried, it's coming out it's too often mm-hmm. argument. And they're not, and again, I hate to keep dumping on Marvel, but a lot of Marvel books feel like filler.
Right.
Like when they jam another issue of, there's no reason Old Man Logan, which I read and enjoy, needs to be out every 2 weeks.
Right.
Unless they outright say, here's the publishing schedule, but they never will.
Right.
And it sounds like I'm cutting DC some slack for doing that, but they've announced it, going into it, by the way, you're getting 2 of these every month. Mm-hmm. Marvel books, you get 18 to 24 issues a year. You don't know what it's going to be like. You don't know. Some of their books ship week to week sometimes. Mm-hmm. And some of those issues are total inventory stories, which you wouldn't, and I know they don't use inventory stories anymore, but total fill-in issues that don't need to be rushed out.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think one of the reasons why people like, and I'm not saying that, Squirrel Girl is obviously an odd example, because some people, I had this guy that was railing on Hellcat earlier this week on my Twitter, and he was just saying, it's like, I don't understand, like, sales don't reflect this. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure Marvel wouldn't publish it if it wasn't doing well for them in some capacity.
In some capacity, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it may not be doing well in the direct market, but maybe it's doing well in Scholastic book fairs, or maybe it's doing well on Amazon or something like that. But I mean, I think that Squirrel Girl works because, at least in part, because it kind of, besides that one issue where they had Nightmare, I don't know, do you read Squirrel Girl?
Yeah, of course. They taught you coding in that issue.
It was amazing. Binary
yes.
coding. Binary counting. It was amazing. But yeah, I mean, like, besides that one issue, Erica Henderson did every issue this year, and she did,
and a graphic novel.
And a graphic novel, which is incredible. And I actually think that, sometimes For me, I think part of the reason why I love Squirrel Girl and stick with it as much as I do is because I'm invested in the team and what they're doing. And sometimes when you have these filler issues, while it may be quality teams, it kind of pushes people off the book because they're like, well, if this doesn't matter, then why am I reading it?
And literally, I had somebody just say, I don't want these next 2 issues of Old Man Logo because it's a different artist.
Right, yeah.
Old Man Logan, whatever. I meant Old Man Logan.
I like Old Man Logo. I think. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
People do really love Andrea Sorrentino, though, so...
Sure.
Yeah, but I do think one thing that people forget a lot, and I'm not saying retailers do, but I mean, bringing up the Todd Allen article again, people like to find answers when there's a problem. And one of the things that I think doesn't get brought up enough is there's lots of... I mean... I think we've talked about this before. There's so much competition in day-to-day life, not even comic related. Like, it's easy to blame Marvel, and I think Marvel plays its part. And it's easy to blame Diamond, and sure, Diamond probably plays its part. But at the same time, frankly, part of the reason why I switched to trades is I don't have space for any more comics.
That is exactly what I tell a lot of people. It's like, as an adult collector, it's not a question of I can't afford this. It's I don't have time to read everything I buy, and I don't have anywhere to put it.
Yeah, like I'm not going to name names, but I have boxes of comics from a specific publisher who sends them to me, and I honestly don't, because I would feel horrible if I threw them out, and I could give them to my comic shop, but they won't take them, and I don't know what to do with them, and I'm just like, it's kind of an odd place. It's like It's like I want less comics. It's almost like the part of the reason why digital I can understand the appeal of digital is at least it exists just in this tiny little box that I have on my that's literally sitting next to me, and it can have thousands.
Not
of
a large cardboard box that weighs 40 pounds when it's filled.
Exactly. Like I organized two long boxes a couple weeks ago, and I thought I was going to need to take a nap afterwards. I was so exhausted.
Yeah.
But I mean,
David, I literally have a storage facility that's 5 feet by 10 feet. And it has 90 boxes of comics in it.
Yep.
And those are not Challenger's overstock. That is the comic collection that I've built up since I was reading.
Yeah. Well, you make me feel better because you're like the first person, I think, besides Jeff Johns, who has actually admitted to the fact that they have more comics than me.
I guess you're welcome.
Yeah. But it is interesting. It's like I think people forget about simple things like that, or simple things like, frankly, I am so I have all of Preacher season 1 still on iTunes to watch. I have I have a bunch of other stuff TV shows to catch up with. I feel like there's a bunch of movies I'm missing. It's like life is so competitive anymore. Sometimes that kind of thing just comes up, and it's like, how do you fit it all in? And I think sometimes the economy of time is things that people forget about in the mix when it comes to drop off like this.
If you just look at superheroes, outside of comics, you have all of the movies, you have the Netflix shows, you have the cable shows and the regular television shows, the week-long CW shows. You have all the video games, you have collectible card games, other games, and now they're branching out into every type of economy that you can get to. Like Marvel has a line of adult bed sheets or suits, Tony Stark suits and whatnot, and now more than ever, as a geek, you can get things in every facet of your life. The Williams-Sonoma Marvel cookware from several years ago.
Did you make that up? Did you just make that up?
No, that's for real. I legit have a Williams-Sonoma Captain America spatula that was given to me as a gift, as well as a Williams-Sonoma Captain America apron that was also given to me as a gift.
Important question: is there a Mjolnir? And I probably butchered that. Tenderizer.
No, you said it exactly right. And no, there is not.
There really should be. Oh my god, I would buy that.
To my knowledge, there isn't. But how many different lightsaber chopsticks are there, or Death Star waffle makers, or and I'm branching out of superheroes, but you can get. I'm sure there's a Spider-Man waffle maker somewhere.
I think a really important point to make is the fact that people were shocked that Doctor Strange was a big hit, but Marvel's a machine at this point. But what really, to me, showcases how crazy comics and superheroes being adopted into everything is the fact that both Legion is getting a TV show. And it looks really good.
Yes, both of those things. Yes.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, we're 2016 / upcoming to 2017 is a weird time because you can have Noah Hawley or Howley or however you pronounce it create a TV show about David Haller, who was frankly, and I apologize to Legion superfans out there, never that good of a character in the comics.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre. It's genuinely amazing, but I will be watching that show 100%.
I'm down for it as well. I can't wait. Yeah.
So I know you have...
I don't know where the time is going to fit in to watch that. I may have to sacrifice something else, but,
yeah.
you know.
But I do think that the problem is it's a lot more complex than not downplaying Todd Allen's article, but I mean, it's a lot more complex than any, like, 8-item list or anything like that. It's the world we live in. It's like everything is competing for not just or the dollar, but time. And it's such a fascinating place to be in, because how do you survive? How do you survive in these, transitioning conditions? But I wanted to end in a positive place, because I know you have busy Christmas plans tonight.
Sure. I want to jump in with one last thing before we step away from that. This topic is, do you watch The New Girl?
I used to.
Okay. They did their Christmas episode this week, and basically there was an incident with UPS where Winston didn't get the Christmas gift he needed for that day for a friend. Mm-hmm. So he and Schmidt went to this thing that they didn't really understand. It was called a store. And in the store, they had a lot of things, and they had someone there to help you. But it was a very awkward exchange, because you had to deal with this guy who was a little bit needy. And ultimately, they didn't have the thing Winston wanted. They had a much higher priced, fancier version that he did not want to pay for. Mm-hmm. And they wound up leaving the store yelling, like, this is why people shop online. Mm-hmm. And while it was funny, part of me died inside.
Well, I guarantee you that I think it's Liz Merriweather who makes that show.
Yes, it is Liz Merriweather.
I guarantee you she is very... I mean, obviously she's not making a joke without understanding that there's truth to it. But it is very true. I mean, people are mortified by it. And sometimes there's like, I hate to cast aspersions on Barnes & Noble as Alaska's single bookstore. But, I was looking to buy a DVD series for my nephew, and it was $64.99 for a season of TV, and online it was $39.99. And there's competition everywhere, and like not only that, but people don't want to deal with like people who are like, you go into some places and they'll be pretentious about it. That's one of the things about comic shops, is a lot of times people don't like the idea of comic shops because you go in there and sometimes the employees make you feel like outsiders. And while that may not necessarily be true universally these days, I do think that perception persists.
And ultimately, before we step on to what's great about next year, I want to reiterate that I don't think this is necessarily just a comics thing. I think this is an economy thing.
100%. I mean, I think a big problem these days is how do businesses set themselves apart enough to make sure that people keep coming to them instead of going to Amazon.
Right.
Okay, so to finish up, I want to ask two things, and you can jive with them or with both at the same time if you want. But
sure.
First off, you said that this, regardless of what's going on in the business side, qualitatively, you think it's a good year in comics. What are you really liking, and what are you really excited about in comics upcoming for 2017?
Well, I'm a little sad about the things that I'm liking the most because they've all ended.
Oh.
Obviously, it was Vision.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan of Mockingbird. I think Mockingbird was so much fun and so great for what you got so much more out of it because Chelsea Kane had so many great Easter eggs and so many hidden things. And Kate Nemesek, who had never heard of before this book, just really had such a great cohesive unit working relationship together. I think it was wonderful. Mm-hmm. I still am a big fan of month-to-month books. I still love The Fix. It's on the top of my reading pile all the time. There was a book that came out by a Canadian author, Tom Gauld, a book called Moon Cop, which I just fell in love with. And it's basically exactly what the title implies. He is a cop on the moon. Mm-hmm. But it's just a very bleak and heartbreaking book, but it was wonderful. So looking ahead, the things that already exist, I want to continue. You know, the new Hawkeye book from this week was excellent. It's a very worthy successor to the Fraction Aha run. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's great. It's so much fun. And I think that it's going to hopefully connect with the same people and fit in that Squirrel Girl, Hellcat Ms. Marvel corner of the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm.
Although Ms. Marvel is way more tied into the other events and stuff, but she seems to manage that pretty well. Champions is a lot of fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead to things that haven't come out yet, I have the most faith in curse words for 2017. Yeah, because Image gave us the first 2 PDFs of the first 2 issues in PDF form, so we've gotten to read 1 and 2. And I say this not like, oh, they gave it to us. No, they gave it to any retailer who is on their mailing list. You know, they will give you these things to say, hey, here's this book, and it's excellent. It is all the absurdity and weirdness of Ryan Brown from God Hates Astronauts, reined in by Charles Soule from Daredevil and Letter 44. But at the same time, a lot of Ryan's weirdness is pulling Charles out of what may be his comfort zone. So he is getting to expand while Ryan is being reined in, and that is the perfect storm of creativity. The first issue is very good. The second issue is excellent. I am on board for this book 100%.
I think what you said there, where how Charles is getting brought out by Ryan and Ryan is getting reined in a little bit by Charles, is kind of exactly like that's exactly what I was hoping for from that book. And it actually, in a weird way, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it kind of feels like that for Spencer and Lieber too, because like Lieber always to me has felt like he's had great comedic timing, and I've never really thought of Nick Spencer as a funny writer, but they they bring out the best in each other, and I guess that's what you want out of a creative team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And from the success of Superior Foes, as far as the critical success, it wasn't a huge seller for us. You're like, these guys can do it, and then the fix is just Superior Foes completely amped up with all the breaks taken off, and it works so well together. Yeah,
absolutely. Anyway, is there anything else that's standing out for you, or is that like the main excitement right now?
That's the main excitement. I want to push that. We're doing something different for us in March. March is Women's History Month, and we've decided to celebrate it by inviting any and all women creators to Challengers in March to sign hopefully every single day of the month.
Wow.
We want to have 30 different people signing, or 31 different people signing every day. And I realize it's a weird thing to say, because we're not trying to marginalize women and say you only belong in this month. Anybody who's shopped with us knows that we have done as many women creator signings that we have male creator signings, and we would never think of let's celebrate Male History Month, because that just seems like you don't need to do that kind of thing.
Does that even exist?
I
hope
think
not.
I think it's every other month.
Just the other 11 months on the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. So like we don't want people to feel like they're being marginalized, because people are welcome to sign here all the time. We have Ashley A. Woods, who's the artist of the upcoming book, Lady Castle, already signing, and we just had Sarah Beacon for doing the cookbook for Fat Rice, and I feel like I'm trying to defend that. Like, we always have women here, but we really want to showcase a lot of local talent, so we're targeting that. So a lot of our energy has been into, to get 31 people to sign, we have to ask 50 people, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I totally understand.
I think we have 11 of the dates filled up so far.
Wow.
But that's taking a lot of our energy, and that to me, that's honestly the most exciting thing we have going forward. So it's taken a little bit of my eyes off of what's coming out, but we are looking forward to next week when we get all the catalog solicits for all the March books. Those will start going up digitally, so we'll get a chance at seeing what those are.
Well, I think one good thing about the events, or the signing thing is I think a big differentiator for not just your store, but other stores who do events, is it seems like those things stimulate the community feel and get people more invested in the store. And even beyond that, it gets people coming into the store, because that's, to get somebody to buy something, they have to be there. And like that kind of stuff draws them in. And it's good that the stores that I talk to that seemingly do the best are the ones who kind of push having more of a tie to the store in such a way.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, it's you're a reflection of your community, and the way you are that is by listening and responding and being part of your community. And we're not just here for people to come in and buy books from. We're here to hopefully be more a part of their lives than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Patrick, I really hope that you have an excellent end to 2016, and 2017 is great for you. And I hope I'm hoping everything kind of starts what's the word I'm looking for? It just starts
picking up.
That's the one I'm looking for. Anyways, because I think comics they're in a good place, but I think it's just, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So maybe you're going to have to come back on in a few months and we can talk about where things are then. But
sure.
Thank you for taking the time with me, and I hope you have a good evening.
David, thank you for having me on your podcast again. I am a longtime listener of Off Panel, and I do miss Sketched, but I'm happy that you're still doing this, and I'm happy to be part of it. Happy holidays, brother.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Patrick Brower, co-owner of Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago. You can find Challenger on Twitter at @Challengers, on Facebook at /ChallengerComics, and on their site at challengercomics.com. Also, if you're in the Chicago area, make sure to stop by the shop. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow it on Twitter at @SketchComic, or follow me at @SliceFriedGold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. If you want to give me a Christmas present, give the show a rating and review while you're at it. Supposedly it convinces iTunes to love the show more, and I'd appreciate it if you helped it out. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen, as they're totally rad. As a reminder, Off Panel will be on a break until 2017. Look for more Off Panel the second week of January, and thanks to everyone for listening this year. I hope you have a happy holidays.